Sorry about that. So things, I don't know, technically Wi-Fi kind of thing. I don't know what happened. So I'm trying to. Hopefully this goes way better than the previous attempt. So let's get started. So enhanced participation process of Indigenous peoples at the UN General Assembly. I think this is one of the most significant processes coming out of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples, which was held in 2014, which we'll try to elaborate a little bit during this when I go through this whole thing. I did prepare a deck of slideshows or like a PowerPoint kind of thing, but I have not figured out how to have what I have over here and show it to you on the screen. Um, I overestimated my abilities to do this, and I in one day and underestimated the amount of work that it requires to figure this out. I tried Zoom, I tried some other things as well, including Skype, because yeah, Skype as well. But so I have to apologize that I don't have the slides for you right now. But if you want them, like I can send it to you by email or post them somewhere else on a Google Drive or something else. So what I will do, I think, is to just run you through the slides by explaining it a little bit, and then yeah, so you can, and hopefully at the end of it or at some point, I can, yeah, what can I do? I don't know. Oh yeah, maybe I can add them as slides into like a YouTube video or something, just to so you know what the hell I'm actually talking about. So basically, what we're talking about is enhanced participation process of Indigenous peoples at the General Assembly, and so basically, what we'll try to do within the next half an hour, 20 minutes or so is first like explain a little bit who is it for, which is very important because that is a question that a lot of people have been asking. Second, why is enhanced participation important to Indigenous peoples? Why is it very important to us? And the third is what is the plan of action that we have as Indigenous peoples to enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples representative institutions at the GA, and GA by GA I mean the General Assembly, and what can states do to help us in this regard. So I think it is very important to note that enhanced participation process, right? Who is it for? If you, I would highly recommend you to reference or like look up the Alta outcome document. Alta Norway is like place like very far up north in Norway, which was the, at least to me, the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples actually was the meeting that was held in advance of the World Conference, so that Indigenous peoples from all over the world could consolidate their positions, and we did that. We did that in Alta. So Alta was a process, was a meeting, and it provided a document. And this outcome document has several themes, and I think for the enhanced participation process, theme 2, paragraph 10 is very important. Paragraph 10 has two elements. The first one is that it says, like, and quoting, we call for at a minimum permanent observer status within the UN system, enabling our direct participation through our own governments and parliaments. Sorry, I don't have coronavirus. It's just a cough. So through our own governments and parliaments, and our own governments include inter alia artisanal councils and authorities. So here's the thing. When you talk about enhanced participation of Indigenous peoples in the UN system, and it derives from the World Conference process from its outcome document, then you're talking about this particular element, the direct participation of indigenous governments and parliaments, assemblies, councils, you name it. Um, that's what we call representative institutions. So, for example, might well be. I'm not saying that it should be, but it could be the Sami parliaments in Norway, Finland, or Sweden, or what they now have, the Sami Parliamentary Council. It could, I don't know, a lot of nations in the U.S., a lot of nations in the northern side of the Medicine Line. It could be ICC, Inuit Circumpolar Council. It could be a lot of traditional governments and councils, not just in the what we call the global north, but also in the global south, in the Pacific, for example. There are many indigenous peoples out there that have their own government forms and that would benefit from this particular process. So that's particularly that's just to highlight why this particular process is for not just NGOs, indigenous funds or philanthropical organizations or other types of organizations. This is particularly for indigenous governments and parliaments, or what we call representative institutions. I think that's very important to highlight because a lot of people, they think that it is to elevate the status of indigenous people's organizations within the UN system. We have indigenous people's organizations. If you want to have an elevated status as an organization, you can apply for ECOSOC status and go into like a consultative status with the ECOSOC. That is possible. But we're not talking about that because that is what is already at the table. That is something that indigenous peoples can already apply to if they so choose. But this is particularly for our governments. So the second element is why it is so important, right? So the first element of theme 2, paragraph 10 is outlining who this particular process is for. And the second element, at least the way that I read it, is to outline why it is important that we have enhanced participation. So the second element reads as, pursuant to the universal application of the rights of self-determination for all peoples, recommends that the UN recognize indigenous peoples and nations based on original free existence, inherent sovereignty, and the right of self-determination in international law. The important thing to highlight in this is particularly the first paragraph. The first sentence. Pursuant to the universal application of the right of self-determination for all peoples. Right of self-determination for all peoples, that is included in the UN Charter, and which means that we as peoples, that's why it's very important that we continue referring ourselves to indigenous peoples as peoples. Capital P, and S, not people without an S, but that we have the right of self-determination. Pursuant to that right, we engage in this process and recommend that the UN recognize our nations based on our sovereignty and original free existence. So that's why, at least according to the Alta Outcome document, it is very important that these peoples have this enhanced participation process. But it is so how does that translate? What are the hurdles? What are the challenges that these peoples are facing in real life when it comes to the UN system? I'm not talking about like the domestic policies or domestic issues. I'm talking about specifically the international issues, the multilateral negotiations that we engage in, whether they occur in Geneva, New York, Bonn, all around the world, wherever the UN work takes us. So it is very important to highlight that this particular process, the enhanced participation process, is actually an almost 100-year process. And I'm not kidding. It is actually an almost 100-year process. Because when and I'm going into it a little bit more elaborate in a bit, but it's almost 100 years, almost 100 years ago, in 2019, so last year, a Discahe, so a chief from the Haudenosaunee, still couldn't speak in his capacity as an indigenous leader at the UN Human Rights Council. And I'm going to explain a little bit why it's almost 100 years. Personally, I have experienced the challenges in two processes. One is the UNFCCC process when it comes to the Paris Rulebook, for example, into negotiations regarding Article 6 on carbon markets, and which is now prone to neglect the rights of Indigenous peoples when it comes to these market mechanisms. And the problem that we had was to being able to participate fully into these negotiations, even though we as peoples it's our lands, our territories, our resources are on the line here. We had to go like bend over backwards to be able to be in a room or be able to talk to states. So we kept on looking at this glass ceiling, being able to in these negotiations, and this participation process would shatter that ceiling, shatter that glass ceiling, and make it possible for Indigenous peoples to directly influence the negotiations. Same thing happened under the UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Right now, negotiations are ongoing. Well, it's supposed to be happening right now or next week in New York, but because of the coronavirus, everything has been postponed. And so the UNCLOS, it's established a process to protect the biodiversity of the high seas, which we call the BBNJ Treaty, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. And as Indigenous peoples, like we have, not only from the Pacific, from the Arctic as well, Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, we have a lot of relationships with the oceans. We have a lot of relationship with the biodiversity in high seas, and we have our own management mechanisms and tools to be able to sustainably develop and maintain the biodiversity. Right now, this process is using science as a model, as a reference point for how to preserve the biodiversity. And whereas what we say is, well, you got science, but you also have traditional knowledge. Or, sorry, I don't like to use traditional knowledge. I'm going to use the knowledge of Indigenous peoples. And you need to provide equity and equality between the two, so that they're on equal footing. Because if you have them on equal footing, there can be co-creation of new knowledge, or to protect the biodiversity of the high seas. So, but in these peoples, we have either we speak last, or we have to speak through states, and that is very difficult for us if we want to directly and meaningfully participate in decision-making processes that affect us. So those are like some real life examples, and I know a lot of my relatives, relations that have been in the movement for a while now can also provide numerous cases or situations where we kept hitting that glass ceiling, and which again signifies the importance of this enhanced participation process for Indigenous peoples at the GA level. All right. So 100-year process, right? I'm not kidding. So 1923, 1925. You most likely have heard it already. Descahe from Haudenosaunee and spiritual leader Ratana from Aotearoa, New Zealand. They went to the League of Nations. Either they were denied access or denied to speak, and they went to the League of Nations trying to advocate for the peoples, for the fate and the well-being of their peoples, but they were denied access and or to speak. So that was actually the first, um, uh, at least, yeah, that was the first element or occasion or occurrence of this whole transportation process. That, to me, like it kickstarted it back then. 1977, Indigenous peoples went first. It's the first time Indigenous peoples went into the UN, and the first meeting was organized on Indigenous peoples. So you have 1923 all over here, 1923, 25, 1977. So that's a gap of 50 odd years of inaction from the UN or League of Nations back then, acknowledging the rights of Indigenous peoples. And then, so like 1977 up until 2007, Indigenous peoples have been advocating for like basic human rights, which culminated into the adoption of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples on September 13, 2007. So then it went quick, you know. So you have 2007. So Indigenous to the UN went from consideration to commitment to the rights of Indigenous peoples. And then in 2014, with the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples, it went to recommitment to the rights of Indigenous peoples. So 2014, we as Indigenous peoples, we included this transportation process as an element into the outcome document. And then supposedly the lifespan or timeline was until 2017, but there was, and I'll get into that later a little bit. There was something that happened between 2014 and 2017 that was not helpful to the process, causing this to be make this to be a challenging process, if it wasn't challenging at all at first, but it's more challenging right now that we have something. 2017, a new resolution was passed, something that we could work with, not live with, but work with, up until the next milestone, which would be hopefully September this year. So and then I talked about denied entry to speak. 1977, Indigenous peoples first entered the UN. Adoption Declaration 2007, World Conference, so the Alta meeting 2013, of course, that called for the enhanced participation process. 2014, United Nations recommits to the rights of Indigenous peoples, and enhanced participation process is included. So what happened after the World Conference on Indigenous peoples? If you look at the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples outcome documents, if you look particularly to OP 33, OP means operative paragraph, which it's established the process. And so OP 33 established the process. You go further down the document, you see OP 40, and OP 40 sets out the timeline and modalities of this enhanced participation process. And that is and by the way, like these views are my personal views. These are not the views of Indigenous peoples at large, Indigenous peoples in general, of a coalition. These are my views, and I think that's where we actually after the after World Conference, we dropped the ball a little bit. Let me explain. So, the UN General Assembly calls for the World Conference, right? 2010. So we there was a brainstorming meeting in Copenhagen that was held a little bit after that, and then the modalities resolution was passed, and Indigenous people started to organize ourselves. There was a global coordinating group was created with representatives from all 7 regions and representatives from both the Women's Caucus and the Youth Caucus as well. And we started to coordinate and to organize, and which culminated into regional and thematic preparatory meetings. So let's see what want to come out of this World Conference. And so that process was very well organized. Of course, it had some hiccups, but it was very well organized. And then, and then also meeting was held. And then what was most important was the continuous advocacy throughout. So from 2012 up until 2014, Indigenous Peoples, through the GCG, and also later a lobbying team was established that will be permanently based in New York, running up to the World Conference. They engaged with the member states as well as the UN, both in Geneva as well as in New York, on enhanced participation. On the World Conference, on our priorities. It was very. We were very hands-on. We were very proactive. We did a lot of things. I was lucky to be the Pacific representative to the GCG, as well as Pacific representative and the lobbying team while we were in New York, in the 6 months in advance of the World Conference, and that intensity, it was so intense. It was so good. That intensity, it vanished after we adopted the World Conference and Indigenous Peoples Outcome document. Whereas, in retrospect, of course, we should have maintained that momentum for the implementation of the outcome document, because not only the enhanced participation process was part of the outcome document, but many more processes were part of it as well. For example, repatriation of sacred items of Indigenous peoples, which is also a process that will come out of the outcome document. But I do have to recognize that there were Indigenous peoples from the Arctic in North America, particularly as well, that have been able to do some follow-up for the enhanced participation process after the World Conference. And that is where we, as a global movement, should have had should have engaged more in, we should not have dropped the ball. Anyway, what happened is it happened. But the thing is, and this is, again, ironically, this is where enhanced participation process kind of kicks in, or why it is so important. We as Indigenous peoples, doesn't matter if you're 2 representatives or 20 representatives in a lobbying team, you still have to talk through states. You still have to lobby states. You still have to try to gain access, and it also depends on mostly depends on the goodwill of a number of states. We had a group of friendly states, group of friends, how we call it, states that were it was actually a remnant of the World Conference process. So a number of states, mostly WEOC states, Global North, as well as Australia and New Zealand, Global Latin America, GRULAC nations, were part of this group of friends, and if it was specifically designed for this World Conference, but and it was actually it continued beyond the World Conference, and so it was probably less coordinated and less strong as it should be, which led eventually into what I would call like a failure to launch. So, like I said, in the World Conference outcome document, OP40 sets a time span for this and its participation process. And it said, like in 2017, there will be a resolution to actually implement this process for enhanced participation. Sadly, this group of friends were outmaneuvered. They were not as strong, not as consolidated as they were before at the World Conference, and which gave room to what we call the like-minded states, so not so friendly states, to successfully lobby other states and to water down the resolution. So the group of friendly states, Indigenous Peoples, advisors, and the President of the General Assembly, what they've been able to do was to salvage what was left and making sure that to kick the can further down the road instead of like killing the process. They've been able to maintain some of the process that was so that it could be eventually be restarted again. Meanwhile, so that's 2017, 18, 19. The World Conference, no, sorry, not World Conference, but the enhanced participation process, it also allows other UN branches, bodies, or elements to also enhance participation of Indigenous peoples. So what did Geneva do? This is now it was a New York process, but now what did Geneva do at the Human Rights Council? It started to acknowledge, to take on that the idea of also enhancing the participation, and it started to a resolution to enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples within the Human Rights Council, and that resolution is A/42/L.24. When it got adopted, it was mostly drafted by Indigenous peoples. By Indigenous peoples and member states. So like we had actually direct influence in the text and the design of the resolution. So this will ensure what happened between the World Conference and what's happening right now. So if you look at what occurred and that 2017, there was like failure to launch, and the Human Rights Council is now starting this enhanced participation process. You pretty much see the current state of play. You see the chess pieces on the board. Like how do they look? You don't see their moves yet, but like you've identified the chess pieces. So for Indigenous peoples, like how do we influence this current state of play? So what did the Indigenous peoples do? Well, hats off to the Sami parliaments and the Asian Indigenous Peoples Pacts, COICA from the Amazon Basin, International Indian Treaty Council, those and many other organizations. They organized a follow-up meeting to the first dialogue on enhanced participation. First dialogue was held in Bangkok, 2016, and with these developments, with the current state of play, they believe that there was a need for a follow-up meeting, identifying what is the current state of play and what will we do, what do we want to do. So Indigenous peoples were invited from all 7 regions. Unfortunately, I was invited and I participated in that meeting on behalf of one of the participants from the Pacific. Unfortunately, no one from Africa was able to attend due to reasons beyond their control. and we were there was some we also they also invited representatives from Asia. Also, most of them could not participate. So, like, only luckily one of them was able to participate. But so there was like a 3 to 4 day meeting, and was very intense. And Indigenous Peoples, we consolidated. All right, what is the current state of play, and what are we going to do? This meeting was held in Quito. Apparently, it's very high. So at least in terms of elevation. I think this is the highest that we've been to when it comes to a meeting. Not just on high as in status, but also high as in elevation. So we came up with a document, and it outlines four key decisions, 7 next steps in relation to the GA, and what else? 4 decisions and 3 steps on the Human Rights Council, some pillars and some other things that we've established, and also some analysis that we've done, and what states can do as well to continue with this process and help us with this process. So we came up what I would call is like a plan of action, like the plan to enhance the participation of Indigenous governments, and we took into account the process both under the GA as well as under the Human Rights Council. But before we went into outlining what the next steps were, like we outlined the basic principles, what an interpretation process must be guided by. So I fortunately have a copy with it. I'm not going to read it all for you, but it is. Hopefully, it is. I think it's available. It's available in English, French, Spanish, and as well as Russian. With the help from a friend at DOSIP, and it outlined. So it started with the basic principles that, like I said, the UN Charter, the right of self-determination of peoples, ICCPR, ICSCR, the Twin Covenants both have the first provision is on right to self-determination. That this process must also be guided by the Alta outcome document, the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples outcome document. That we also take into account the Bangkok paper, which is very important as well, and that this particular process must be fully consistent with all the provisions of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the minimum standards, including, of course, Article 3, right to self-determination, Article 18, right to participate in decision-making processes that affect us, Article 33, and so on. And this is not just for the GA, the GA process, but this is also for the Human Rights Council process. The first thing that this Quito document outlines is that the process under the GA must be restarted, taken based on the achievements previously secured. So that includes the Bangkok outcome documents, and if you look and the compilation of views of states and Indigenous peoples containing possible measures necessary to enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples' representative institutions. I don't have the exact document, but this compilation of views is very important for you to reflect on, because it has some very good ideas, both from Indigenous peoples as well as states. It doesn't have a hierarchy of here's Indigenous peoples, these states and these Indigenous peoples, but it has some both on equal level, and I think it's very good for Indigenous peoples as well as states to go through the document to see where the states were, at least at the time when they drafted this compilation. So that's what I mean with that the declaration, that the enhanced petition process needs to be restarted based on the achievement, the progress made previously. Um, so when it comes to the General Assembly process, what is very important that Indigenous people's representatives are included in state delegations. Like I said, most of the negotiations are intergovernmental negotiations, and Indigenous peoples do not have access to these meetings, and that is a problem. When it comes to an enhanced participation process, like, we need to be at the table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu or you're serving the menu. It is very important that we are at the table, and there are states that do it. For example, Canada does it. Ecuador does it. The Finnish government does it as well. They include Indigenous peoples in their state delegations. Not just so it shouldn't be just for the permanent forum or expert mechanism, but also for these important negotiations and consultations on NS participation in the General Assembly, as well as in the Human Rights Council. Also, what's very important to the GA process is that we need to be included in all informal and formal meetings, consultations, and negotiations. It shouldn't be that, for example, the President of the General Assembly or somebody else, the President of the Human Rights Council, organizes a number of meetings on enhanced participation, and like 3 meetings for Indigenous peoples, but in the margins of other meetings, he has informal meetings on the same topic, but does not include Indigenous peoples. It is very important that all meetings, informal or formal, consultation or negotiation, are held in an open and transparent manner, are conducted in an open and transparent manner, and will include Indigenous peoples and in every stage. That is very important. That we do not come in only at the front end, and then say what we can say, what we want to say, and then states are like, well, we'll take it from here, and then, or PJ says we'll take it from here, and then like they will not include us in every other stage. That is not the goal here. The goal is to be included in every single stage and at every level. I think when you're actually advocating or going through the process of enhanced participation, it shouldn't be at the end of it. At the end of it, that you're like, all right, here you go, this enhanced participation. Now you can participate. Now you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? So when you start this process, you already start showing that you have goodwill, and you include states, and you start including these peoples in the negotiations on this process, in every stage. So it is very important that that we continue to affirm and continue to be adamant about this. That this is Article 18 of the Declaration 101. The right to participate in decision-making processes that affect us. That's why it's very important that this process also includes that as well. So there are a lot of things that will have to be decided and discussed at the GA level before we go into before the end of the 74th session and the beginning of the 75th session of the General Assembly, provided, of course, that the coronavirus does crazy things to the whole schedule. It already did, but hopefully that coronavirus will be gone as soon as possible, and that things will level out as soon as possible as well. There's some benchmarks out here when it comes to participation. Something that we as Indigenous peoples have been advocating for the last couple of years, not just at the GA level, not just at Human Rights Council level, but also at the climate change level, CBD level, oceans level. For example, the new advisors need to be appointed by the President of the General Assembly. Before, we had co-facilitators, John Bernard Henriksen, as well as His Excellency Miguel Luis Alfonso de Alba of Mexico. They were co-facilitators of the modalities resolution for the World Conference. That was historic. A indigenous person, indigenous representative. No, sorry, a co-facilitator who happens to be indigenous. I should say like correctly, as well as a state representative who happens to be a co-facilitator. No, another co-facilitator who happens to be a state representative. Anyway, and they were conducting negotiations and consultations on behalf of the President of the General Assembly with member states as well as indigenous peoples to come to a not a consensus, but like to some common grounds. For the World Conference, we had the same. We had advisors as well, and for the enhanced participation process, we had advisors as well. We had Dr. Claire Charters and Professor James Anaya. They were the last advisors alongside member state advisors as well. And I think that is a construction, that's a method that we need to continue to maintain in all processes that affect indigenous peoples. When it comes to these high-level negotiations that affect indigenous peoples, if you get a sniff of a process that would veer into this particular area of participation and that affect rights of indigenous peoples, immediately call for advisors or co-facilitators, co-moderators. I don't care what you want to call it, but make sure that you're at the table. Make sure that the information flow also flows through the President of the General Assembly or the President of Human Rights Council, also flows through indigenous peoples. I think that is very important. So one of our next steps should be to recommend 4 advisors. Well, I don't foresee that we'll recommend 4 advisors. I foresee that we will recommend 2 advisors, 2 of the indigenous advisors to the PGA. Another thing is, and it's something that has been on my mind for a while now, is that a meeting needs to be held between indigenous peoples and the Secretary General and the President or the President of the General Assembly and the head of DESA to discuss matters regarding enhanced participation. And I'm saying this because to date, at least to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least the Secretary General, since he ascended to the role, has not met with Indigenous Peoples Caucus to date. The previous 2, Kofi Annan, as well as Ban Ki-moon, whenever Indigenous peoples were in town, in New York, during the Purim Forum, for example, he always met with Indigenous peoples. This current Secretary General has not met with Indigenous peoples yet, and this is starting to bother me personally. As in, we are part of the UN. They always say like you're part of the family. You always have a home. You always leave no one behind. All that. Put your money where your mouth is. So it is very important that Indigenous peoples meet with the Secretary General on this particular issue. That we put this on the radar with the Secretary General. Same thing with the office, with the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Recently, she met with the Indigenous peoples, some Indigenous peoples at least, but so far, when Indigenous peoples are at the MRIP, Expert Mechanism on Rights and Peoples in Geneva, or at the Human Rights Council, and she was in town, she did not meet with the Indigenous Caucus. I think those are things that we need to be very vigilant about. That all these people of influence, that we meet with them, that we assert that we are part of the UN. We are part of the equation of sustainable development, sustainable development, sustainable ability. What the hell? And that we meet with them. Head of DES as well. Permanent Forum is the Secretary of Permanent Forum is a part of Department for Economic and Social Affairs. And the head of DESA was the high-level representative that was overseeing the system-wide action plan, the implementation of it, the drafting of it, and the implementation of it. So these are people within the UN system that we need to sit down and talk to, and especially when not just about enhanced participation, but also about issues that affect these peoples right now. There's one thing that is also very important that is in the resolution that I talked about, H/Res/71/321, paragraph 5. I'll put all the things down below in the comments for you to later reflect on. Paragraph 5 states that that is Secretary General will draft a report on the participation of Indigenous peoples. And I think that for us as Indigenous peoples, whenever we have the opportunity, with this coronavirus, we don't have any opportunity right now, but whenever we have the opportunity, we just state clearly that this report needs to include the views of Indigenous peoples. So I highly recommend you to read this particular resolution, and whenever you engage with the UN, whether it's in Geneva, New York, Bonn, whatever, if you have the chance, highlight that this report of the Secretary General must include the views of Indigenous peoples. It cannot be that this gentleman, His Excellency, drafts a report on Indigenous peoples and does not include Indigenous peoples. It cannot be like that. And it's something that we need to assert as well. It's not just like, hey, sir, you need to talk to us. No, you need to also be assertive and like demand that, not demand, but like make it known in your meetings, in your statements, that it is very important to do so. This is and the next point is something that Indigenous people should be doing every time, but not everyone is doing it. And this is meeting with states bilaterally. For example, one of the elements or next steps out of the Quito document says to organize regional consultations with states during the Permanent Forum. Why Permanent Forum? Because a lot of Indigenous peoples converge at the UN in New York, and it's a good opportunity to have a regional caucus meeting and then sit down with states from your region and to discuss things that are relevant to your region, including the enhanced participation process. So it's very important to have these consultations. Otherwise, you kind of go. Otherwise, you're going in cold into the negotiations. Going in cold into negotiations is never good. You need to start all the way up front as early as possible. Get into the game as early as possible. Get into the game at the warm up phase. I don't know, get into it as early as possible and start discussing with states about this. That is important. Another important step is that side events that needs to be hosted related to the enhanced participation process this year as well as next year. The Quito meeting was held with a limited number of people. Not limited, but of course we want to have a lot more people. But then again, funding is always an issue. Availability is always an issue. So side events is very important to build the capacities and awareness on enhanced participation amongst the Indigenous peoples and states and other interested people. And I think because of this whole coronavirus issue is that I'm doing this as well. Hopefully that you can disseminate whatever in any way, shape, or form to people, so that people are aware of the enhanced participation process. And also, like, it's also very important to like engage in state capitals. Um, it is something that Indigenous people, not a lot of Indigenous people do. Um, they go to the UN and they engage with the states at the UN level, or they want to engage with the UN at the UN level. But then again, like, UN is a club of states, and the states are run by the capitals. So you also have to start talking to the capitals, start engaging with them, and especially when it comes to enhanced participation process, because states get their instructions from the capitals. They don't make them. They don't come up with their instructions while they're walking down Second Avenue, Second Alex. Second Alex. That doesn't make any sense. Lexington 42nd. You know, like, they don't come up with their statements or with their positions while getting a coffee. Like, they get their positions from the capitals. So it's very important to engage with the capitals as well and build their capacities as well on enhanced participation process. So what is likely to happen at the GA level? I don't know when the perm forum will be held. Let's hope, let's pray, let's do whatever you do. That this whole virus thing will be done as soon as possible with as less casualties as possible, and because in the margins of the perm forum, a informal interactive hearing will be held, organized by the PGA, on enhanced participation. So that is an entry point. That is a measuring point where these people can engage in, and to start having a dialogue. Supposedly, at the end of the 74th session, the report on its participation will be drafted by the Secretary General, and then will be taken into the GA at the 75th session, so this September, and then the next steps will be determined. So basically, the time window to set a good benchmark, a starting point, is now, and hopefully, well, not when he delivers the report, but like before that. Unfortunately, there are not many entry points. Unfortunately, there's not many meetings held, or online meetings are held, but sorry, still no coronavirus. I'm telling you, no coronavirus. But it is important that we influence the report of the Secretary General, making sure that it includes the views of Indigenous peoples. So a little bit of recap, right? So that was just the GA part of it. The Human Rights Council equation is side of the equation. I will go into that in a bit. So it is. We have outlined some steps, and you'll see the process that we envision within the General Assembly is also something that we envision at the Human Rights Council, and you'll see that in a bit. And also, making it very important that we're proactive on getting the attention of the Secretary General, PGA, and that there's a direct linkage, the direct line of communication between Indigenous peoples, as well, and the leadership of the United Nations. So that's a quick recap of at least the GA part of it. So in Quito, we also discussed the Human Rights Council process, the part of the equation, and the general view was that we will take full advantage of the Human Rights Council Resolution A/HRC/42/L.24. This particular resolution was very fun. but also a little bit of background into it. Something that is very unfortunate is that Indigenous peoples, when as in general, when we engage with the United Nations, um, gravitate towards when it's Geneva, export mechanism rights of Indigenous peoples. When it goes to New York, it gravitates towards the Purim Forum on Indigenous issues. Whereas there are so many more meetings in between, human rights related. For example, in Geneva, for example, the Human Rights Council, its September resolution. It is very important, but there are not many Indigenous peoples engaging with the Human Rights Council. If it's too technical, if it's too difficult, let me know. I'll try to bring in people that I'll talk about a little bit about it myself, and bring in people that are very knowledgeable about that as well, to how you utilize the Human Rights Council and that system as well. If that's too technical, we can take care of that. If it's about finance, if you're not able to participate in the Human Rights Council, I highly recommend you to apply for the UN Voluntary Fund. They just now expanded their mandate, and you can also participate in the meetings of the Human Rights Council, treaty bodies, and now also in the climate change meetings as well. But Human Rights Council is very important, especially when it comes to its resolution, which will be adopted in September. So last September, September 2019, we kickstarted the whole the process of enhancing the participation of Indigenous peoples in the Human Rights Council. I'm not saying that we actually did the actual kickstart, but we kickstarted a process that we felt that we can live with. Again, like I said before, at the General Assembly, you need to have advisors, you need to have direct access, and you need to be at the table, right? So what we did in the drafting of the recommendations for this resolution, we included some elements that would create that direct linkage, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. So, is it any different, Human Rights Council and General Assembly? Yes and no. The biggest difference is that a lot of Indigenous peoples are walking into is that Human Rights Council, you cannot participate without ECOSOC credentials. So your organization needs to have ECOSOC status, Economic and Social Council status, which requires a lot of paperwork and a lot of things. But the biggest concern of Indigenous peoples is that ECOSOC status is for NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and Indigenous peoples, most of them at least, they're not non-governmental organizations. We have our own governments. The Haudenosaunee, they have their own government. The Sami parliaments, they have their own governments. They're all their own government, right? So it's very politically incorrect to, as a government, to apply for an NGO status so that you can get ECOSOC status, so you can go into the Human Rights Council and speak at the Human Rights Council. It is incorrect to do. It's because it's for Indigenous people. It's very important that it's to bring back the balance, right? To this whole enhanced participation process is also contributes to bringing that balance, so that Indigenous peoples can participate as peoples, as nations, as governments in the UN system. And if you want to have ECOSOC status and you're an NGO, you can go for it. It's available, but it is very problematic when you're a government, when you are a traditional council, when you're Indigenous Parliament, Assembly Council, etc., etc. So what do we do? Well, first of all, what we envisioned is that you need to have the process, you need to have a process, and you need to have like an entry point. So what we proposed was that a roundtable would be organized on enhanced participation. This is a follow-up to the previous one that was held last June in Geneva as well. The irony of the enhanced participation process is the following, right? So we talked about earlier in this video that 1923, 1925, Descahe, the Haudenosaunee, and Chief Ratana from Aotearoa tried to enter the League of Nations and were not able to speak or to enter. Fast forward 2019, the Human Rights Council organizes in the margins of the expert mechanism a half-day discussion on enhanced participation. And by coincidence, well, there's no coincidence in life anyway, but it happens to be that the current Descahe, I always thought that Descahe was a person. Descahe, just for you, and so you know, Descahe is a title. It's a leader. And the current Descahe was still not able to participate as a Descahe at the UN. So with almost 100 years, and we still have not, if you use that as a barometer, there's little to no progress. So that was the irony about it. So that was the first meeting. Second meeting, or another meeting, will be organized. This time we said, hold on. What we want right now is to have a co-chair of nominated by Indigenous Peoples to sit alongside a co-chair, preferably the president of the Human Rights Council, to guide this meeting. Again, nothing about us without us. Even at the table, your menu, like all those one-liners, like making sure that Indigenous Peoples or our views are considered equally as the state's views are considered. So we have to nominate a person to be the co-chair, and then of course consultations and negotiations would have to be organized. And so what we call for is that then consultations and negotiations will be held for necessary steps, procedural steps, or necessary measures, procedural steps, and selection criteria. Just to kick off the process. So you have entry point, you have like substance, what are you going to talk about? Now you need to have the process. So what we also call for, again, this is like a copy of the GA process. We call for the appointment of co-facilitators, one Indigenous and one state-nominated representative to conduct informal and formal consultations and negotiations. That's the process. And again, it is very important that we do not go below what we've already established with John Henriksen, Les Malazur, who else was? Yes, I don't know. Dr. Clyde Charters, Professor James Anaya, as the previous co-facilitators and advisors, or Marina Cunningham as well, as co-facilitators and advisors. That we do not, it is very important that we continue that process, so that it's not just a General Assembly, but Human Rights Council as well. Quick sidestep. We did the same at the climate change at the UNFCCC, when the local communities in these people's platform was established in the Paris Agreement. One of the first negotiation sessions was the multi-stakeholder dialogue with states as well as Indigenous peoples. So what we call for in Marrakesh was that there would be an Indigenous moderator, both a substantive chair, which would be the co-moderator, and an indigenous moderator would have to be the co-moderator. That's what we did in 2017. Yeah, 2017, 2018, and then we did the same with another, with another Indigenous co-moderator and substitute chair as co-moderator. So like these things, if you think that it cannot be adapted to a different process, think again. It can be adapted to a different process. You just have to like reference that it already happened at the GA level, which is the highest level of the UN. So it can also be done at the Human Rights Council level. It can also be done at the UNFCCC level. It could also be done CBD. Oceans, we're trying to do it as well. The opportunities are endless, I would say. Anyway, so that's what we're trying to do when it comes to like process in the Human Rights Council enhanced participation process. So what do we do? What are we going to do? The Quito meeting also nominated a good friend of mine, Esteban Castro Diaz from Cunayala, to be the Indigenous co-chair alongside the President of the Human Rights Council during the intersessional roundtable. So in that sense, we were very proactive. We did not wait for a call of nomination, but we said, well, we discussed it in Quito. This is a nominee for the co-chair, and it also shows that, at least in my view, it also shows that because we're so proactive, that it is a very important process for us. Again, same thing with the GA level. Side events would be held, and to raise awareness and build capacities of states as well as Indigenous peoples. And of course, again, at the Human Rights Councils, to engage in bilaterals with states to find common ground outside of informal and formal consultations and negotiations. So, quick recap again. So you have the GA process that we've established, that we're going to kickstart with principles and next steps. We have the Human Rights Council process that we've started with the resolution, next key decisions, next steps. But the problem is that we don't want to see happen what happened before, that there was little to no coordination after the World Conference. So Indigenous peoples were like scattered, and which contributed to the failure to launch in 2017. This time, the Quito meeting decided that Indigenous peoples would form a coordinating body, particularly for this process. Coordinating body would raise awareness for Indigenous peoples, would do actually what Indigenous peoples at the GCG did for the World Conference, but then amended to particularly for the enhanced participation process. But a formal body needs to be formed, of course. We're looking at 2 representatives from each region. So Indigenous peoples have 7 regions. We're trying to nominate 2 from each region, taking into account balance, of course, general balance, intergenerational balance. But a lot of things have to be done between the Quito meeting and the first actual meeting of this coordinating body. So a temporary body was created as well, right in Quito, just to make sure that things are rolling smoothly and that things are not left behind, or that we still, once we have this coordinating body, things have to start. That we have to start organizing ourselves. So this has a number of people, and again, I'm part of it as well. And so we're going to have a meeting soon over Skype, of course. No Skype or Zoom or whatever. Of course, no physical meetings for the time being. Just making sure that things are rolling, making sure that this NS petition process does move along, even though we're all in quarantine and lockdown right now. Hopefully, you guys, when you're watching right now or later on, I hope you're safe. Hope you're healthy and that your families are healthy. Hope your families are safe as well. These are very scary times for all of us. I'm trying to stay healthy as well, and I voluntarily, sidestep, voluntarily quarantine myself because I've been, for the last couple of weeks, I've been in like 4 or 5 different countries. So I've let my family know, you know what, I'm not coming home for a while now. Just sitting this one out, and I think that's right now that's the best thing to do. And hey, I got you, I got Facebook, I got Skype, I got everything. I'm okay. I'm good. All right. Yeah. Obviously, I'm like a monkey going from tree branch to tree branch, and I'm round this up real quick. I think, and also what's very important is to to know what states can do. As I said before, there's a group of states. There are states that have not engaged with the group of states yet. Oh, sorry, the group of friendly states, and there are not states that have engaged with the group of friendly states yet. So the Quito document also appeals to the states what they can do. So again, call for that meeting, right? Call for a meeting with the Secretary General to express their views for inclusion in the Secretary General's report, and the President of the General Assembly to outline their views on appropriate processes for the General Assembly's consideration of Indigenous peoples and has participation in the United Nations as well as substance. That's a very weird sentence. I recommend you to read the document so you can read it yourself, because I was part of the drafting team that drafted this document, and I still have trouble deciphering this particular paragraph. But that's me. Of course, this group of friendly states that is here, right? That's like a remnant of the World Conference and Indigenous Peoples process. Two things to consider: like, do you continue with the group that you have already and try to consolidate, strengthen, coordinate, or do you say, "Hey, you guys, this is it. We're done," and create a new one? Like today, you say you're done. Tomorrow, you create a new group of friendly states. Maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. It's all up to states, but it's very important that if we have a group of friendly states, they are consolidated, they're strong, and they're coordinated, because you can bet your rear end that the like-minded states or the non-friendly states will try to outmaneuver them, and we need a very strong group of friendly states to be able to outmaneuver their outmaneuvering tactics. Of course, it is very important for states to support the inclusion of Indigenous peoples in all consultation negotiations. Goes without saying, including our appointment of the 2 of the 4 advisors to the President of the General Assembly. I have not seen any communication around that yet, but I hope that we can come up with it soon. In terms of the names of the 2 people that we'll propose as advisors. Of course, that's if it's up to anyone, like one meeting would suffice. But again, like this is so delicate. This is such a delicate process that you should be looking at multiple meetings. So the state should request the President of the General Assembly to hold a series of informal but high-level meetings with states on Indigenous peoples enhanced participation in the United Nations. And of course, what is also important is to work with Indigenous peoples on this particular issue. It can be that you got, as a state, you're going to like shoot from the hip, is what I would say, is by just doing what you want to do and not engaging with Indigenous peoples in this particular process. And I think that is very important. Yeah, so like key factors, and I think I'm running up to this spiel talk rant, if you may, on enhanced participation. The key factors of success I would outline is a strong international indigenous coordination, and maybe even stronger group of friends, and direct access to the negotiations, and not just communication lines to the President of the General Assembly. I think if this document says a lot of things, and I highly recommend you to read it as well. If you would like to have a copy, I don't know if I think DOSIP is able to provide copies of these in 4 languages. It's very important to read for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples if you're interested in the enhanced participation process. And this is a benchmark. This is the minimum. You can always add up to it, but we keep on gravitating towards this document. I think that is very important for us. I always say, like, when it comes to Indigenous peoples, advocacy is always a challenge. But when it comes to enhanced participation, we're not playing tiddlywinks here. This is serious stuff. Of course, Indigenous peoples can, governments, parliaments, and councils and other entities can apply for permanent observer status. There are hundreds of entities that have observer status with the UN General Assembly. This is different, though. This is very different. This is very significant. But I think we'll always support whoever is going for permanent observer status. But I think we should not forget this enhanced participation process, because it does have the legitimacy of the Alta outcome document. So I think that is in short I don't know how long I've been talking already about this enhanced participation process. There's not much I can say anymore, though. I don't see any questions, so it's good. I hope that I've been very clear in everything. And again, like, this is not set in stone. I'm not an authority whatsoever. I just wanted to share the document, my thoughts on it, and yeah, like, what I know is what I wanted to share, and I think I will do more of these, actually. I just don't know on what issue or what item, but I thought it would be good, like, to start with an enhanced participation process. And yeah, so if you have any comments, views, or think I'm full of it, just let me know in the comments below. I don't know, or send me WhatsApp or whatever. Tweet. I'm an idiot. Sorry, I am very much. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'll hang around for like 5 more minutes. Otherwise, yeah, these are very scary times for all of us. I don't want to sound like Cronkites or someone else, but I hope you all stay safe Think about each other. Think about yourself. Stay healthy. Um, these are scary times also for our families, the elders, our elders. Um, I hope that we'll all come out of this stronger, and I hope that um, I can also we can talk about this as a lesson, as and we can also see these times as a point of reflection, because I think, at least this is how I think about it, is that we all need reflection at this point. I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on, but it is very important that we think about like what is important. And you can always, if you cannot imagine, well, if you're experiencing this, like you don't want to experience when the shit really hits the fan. No pun intended, because of the toilet paper issues. But climate change is real. And I don't want to send you home or send you back to bed feeling scared. But this is a time to reflect and do what you can. Think about yourself, like I said, your family, your neighbor. There are some scary tax strategies out there, man. Some countries, even the country I'm in right now, is talk about herd immunity. So basically, letting the whole thing free flow and then hoping for the best. That's a scary tactic, man. That's scary for a lot of people, especially for the vulnerable people, and the elderly as well. So take care of each other, and yeah, let's yeah, let me get out of here, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace.